Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode that I'm so excited about. This is with my great friend Emily Joy Powell, who I am so excited for this one because she has a different kind of story that we're going to talk about. Emily is currently, well, she's almost not a student anymore, right?
So
So
close.
Emily is at Utah State University. She got her BS in English teaching, and she's currently working on an MS in English with a focus on literature, culture, and composition at Utah State University as well. So she is teaching introductory English courses at USU. She's been doing that for the past year and a half, and she plans on teaching English either at the university level or high school level after she graduates. Emily is interested in detective fiction, British literature, and foodways, which is, I'm learning now, the study of food and culture.
Yeah.
Emily received an award. She received an award for her research on the history of the recipe card at the USU Research Symposium. That's a pretty cool, unique thing. Um, on a personal note, Emily and I have been friends since high school, which is 10 years ago for me. So we've been
This is
friends for over
crazy.
10 years. And that is crazy to think
That
about.
is.
It's
Yeah,
like, I feel like I just graduated sometimes.
it's
um,
true.
so we've been friends since high school. We did theater together and we were on things like Shakespeare Team, our productions company. I know that we've been on fun trips together. Like we both went at the same time to New York. She
Mhm.
was distracted with other people, and I was not her focus there, but we were still having a fun time in New York together. We went to the Tony Awards together, right?
Yes, yeah, that was
And
awesome.
it was so fun. And then my favorite trip that Emily and I went on together was to her family's cabin at
Oh
a
yeah.
creek. And that was one of the happiest trips ever for me. It was just so fun. We were four-wheeling all over the place. It was beautiful. So we have adventures behind us. It's been really fun to be friends with Emily. She's an excellent person on top of all of her fun studies. So
Thanks.
thank you for being here, Emily.
Oh
Thanks
yeah,
for
of
the intro
course.
that you sent me.
Yeah, which I don't know if I ever told you, but I did eventually I got my minor in theater studies.
Oh, you did
So
get
I
it.
I did, yeah, I got to dabble in that just a tiny bit when I got to
Perfect.
college. But
Awesome. Yeah, you're very good at intersecting your passions and what you're actually doing. I think that's so cool.
thanks.
So, we're going to talk about Emily's study of literature, talking about because the theme of this channel is really like stories and journeys. Why do they matter and stuff? So, first off, for Emily, why did you decide to study literature?
Yeah, it's one of those things that when you tell people, even professors in the department, in English, when you tell people, oh, I'm studying English, they're like, oh, that's awesome, like, are you going to teach? And for me, it's like, yes, yeah, I am going to teach. That's like my secondary degree, but I primarily focus on literature. And even professors are like, why would you do that? Like, jobs are so limited. um and so it's a very small field and a very kind of limited field right now to go into. But for me, um, I I don't know what else I would want to spend my time doing this much. Um, I remember in high school when everybody's thinking about college and where they want to go and what they want to study. Um, when I sat down and started thinking about it as a senior, and I don't mean this in like a put down way, but I was thinking like, okay, well, I'm going to go study English because I don't know what else I would do. And not that like I don't have other skills or things, but I just, what else would I want to spend my time doing? And literature in particular, because um, it's, I don't know if flexible is the right word, but like literature, there's so much within literature. It's really malleable, and there's lots of different like genres or eras or authors that you can study. Um, and I wrote to you before about why I wanted to study this, and largely because of an English teacher that I had, like multiple, but my junior year in particular, I took AP literature and felt very much out of my depth and was kind of struggling to keep up with the class. And there was one day that we were studying a poem, and poetry is not my strong suit. I don't love poetry. And we were studying a poem and we were analyzing the theme and all of these things. And for some reason, I don't know why, my analysis was completely off. Like the poem was about like a World War II fighter pilot in a storm, and I thought it was about something completely different. Like I completely missed the mark. I was way off. And so I was really embarrassed when it came time to like share my analysis. I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't even get this right. And I love this teacher so much to this day because rather than just completely shutting me down and being like, no, it's about this instead, she said something to the extent of like, oh, no, I can see how you got that idea. Like that kind of makes sense. And then like carried on with the lesson. It wasn't a big deal. And that was the moment I was like, oh my goodness, I can be wrong, but still be right if I provide like enough evidence. And like, well, that's not entirely true. That's what I do love about studying literature, is that I can create my own analysis. I can really take out other themes. And as long as I can provide my reader, my audience with evidence to see my point, like my thoughts and feelings about a piece of writing can be valid. And so that's a huge thing. So yeah, that's a bit long, but
no, I love that because like I remember going through similar stuff in whatever English classes I was in.
Yeah.
And sometimes being like, I don't even know what I just read.
Yeah.
And then but like trying my hardest to analyze, and like maybe I wasn't as good as you at like defending my analysis, because but like it does feel vulnerable to be like, this is my perspective, and you put it out there, and it's like cool that
Yeah.
you can find out that as long as I can like give it my best shot, like and like really defend it, I can't be wrong here. That is cool.
Yeah.
Huh. I love that.
Thanks.
Which teacher was that?
Okay, well, since she's been married, but it was Miss Hewitt
Hewitt?
when I
Uh-huh.
was there, which I think it's Mrs. Bullock now.
Okay. I
But yeah,
remember the
she
name
was,
Hewitt. Yeah,
yeah,
I never had
absolutely
her.
phenomenal.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
that. I think that's also good teaching, right? To not put down a student for the effort that
Yes.
they've put forth, especially in a field like that, where like it wasn't a 2+2 question.
Yeah.
It was an interpretive question, and so that is nice. The
Hmm.
English lets you elaborate. Um,
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, just her class and her teaching style has shaped a lot of like how I want to be an English teacher, especially in a field like composition and literature. Like, as you said, it's not a 2+2 answer. It's a lot of self-discovery. And so being able to like build up a student, even if their analysis truly was quite off the mark, like that was a huge pedagogical move on her part. That was really awesome.
oh, good teachers. That makes me
Yeah.
happy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, going with the theme of you're studying English, right?
Hmm.
And I'm actually in a job right now where we fund, so I'm in a government position, and we focus on funding STEM education, science,
Mm.
technology, engineering, mathematics. And guess what's missing? Anything humanities related, which is what
Yeah.
I actually have a background in as well. You studied
Yeah.
English, I studied German, and
Yeah.
did a philosophy minor. So like I get this like, why am I doing this? Because I actually love the humanities side, but like specifically with your focus on literature and English, what
Hmm.
um I have this disconnect with my job because of that. But I want to hear your perspective on what value literature as a whole adds. And do you think that it's necessary to retain that literature for a healthy society, even though we have this push for more of that STEM stuff, which I
Yeah.
see there's a place for that,
Oh
but
yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Um, I mean, as someone who does study literature and is going to be an English teacher, like my natural answer is like, yes, absolutely, there's a place for this. Um, and whenever I talk about this with people, I always think back to something that my husband experienced in school. So my husband is a music teacher, and especially in like middle and high school, it's always an elective course. It's not really valued as much as I think it definitely should be. And he had an education course where he was asked to write a defense of why his fake school in the class setting, why his school should support a music program. And the professor explicitly said, you cannot say like music helps with test taking or retention or all of these things, like you have to defend it on its own, because music in and of itself is worth teaching. And I remember he came home and told me that, and I was like, oh my goodness, I love that, because as somebody who teaches English and literature, that's exactly how I feel. We're like, yes, absolutely. Like everybody's going to learn how to read and to write. We use that all the time. There's great natural application as far as like learning empathy and inference and those types of things. But then like kind of at the base level, like English in and of itself should be valued just like as something that people do and love to read.
Like
And
there's
especially,
inherent value because people
yes,
engage in that. That's
yes,
important to realize. I love that.
yeah. And like I said, there are an incredible amount of benefits of like studying literature or taking English courses, in that vein. And because so as a graduate instructor, I teach like sophomores and freshmen in college a lot. And so most of them are coming straight from high school. And are of the thinking of like, okay, why did I need to learn about Shakespeare? Why did I need to learn about like Ernest Hemingway or Toni Morrison, right? Because there's no natural application that they see, especially from a literature class, to their real life. And honestly, like most of the like explicit things and skills that you're learning in a literature class, no, you're never going to use again in real life unless you're like me and go on and study it. Like I remember, Miss Hewitt, we wrote essays every week in prep for the AP test, and everybody was like, when am I going to write essays? And she's like, honestly, unless you go into English, you're never going to write an essay again. And like, I obviously still writing an insane amount of essays, but like nobody else is. So there's lots of skills like that that you will never use again. But as I mentioned before, my favorite like side effect, the thing you learn from literature, is just like empathy. And that's huge in this world where it is so easy to get online and to judge people. And people say like we're an incredibly divided politically, and learning empathy and learning to better understand someone from where they're coming from, like that's huge. There are so many people in so many places I will never go and I will never interact with, but I can read stories and I can read writing, from these people, and work to better understand a culture, that again I might never go to. And that's huge. Like that's a phenomenal thing that we can do with stories. And because I know you're all about stories, and that's like that's what I love. And it is a bit of a cliche, but that's probably one of my favorite things. And there's so much else, like like you do learn inference, you learn composition and writing, and you learn how to analyze and critical thinking skills. But that's probably my favorite, is learning to appreciate other people and where they're coming from, and really work to value them as an individual who is different from you. So
I think that so that hits at a core thing that I think like how do I put this into words? Because it's talking about this feeling of empathy. Um, and I I kind of have this perspective like who cares if we can progress as a society in terms of like we're building new things and we have this cool technology, and who the heck cares if we don't love each other,
yeah,
because that empathy is key to making life actually good and feeling like we're doing it for a purpose. It's the why behind, like, it explains kind of why those things can be valuable. Otherwise, progress by itself without enhancing in an understanding and love and an improvement of all humanity, like
yeah.
I don't care what technology we can build if it's gonna, if it's not for the sake of people. And I love that. That's a cool approach. Um, Last night I was just I went to the theater and and I saw what I would consider my favorite. The, okay, I saw Into the Woods,
Oh,
and I've never seen it live until last night, and
mm-hmm.
it's this hodgepodge of fairy tales and these like, and of course I'm doing this whole thing with a lot of fairy tales lately, and so um it I came out of there feeling a lot of empathy for people. And these are fictional people, but
Yeah.
also they're real. They're real.
Yeah.
People are very real in these stories. And so
Yeah.
it's just, I think I love people better after viewing something that's based on this literature. It's cool.
Hmm.
So that was me, but it's
No, no,
because of
that,
what you're saying.
yeah.
So yeah. Will you talk a little bit about your thesis right
For
now,
sure.
and
Yeah.
then talk about why are you doing it? So, because I think it's really cool.
So to give background, I as far as a master's program here at Utah State, we do a thesis project. So you can pick a project that's like 30 pages long, or you can typically creative writers do something that's more like 60 pages if they want to like publish a book of poetry or something like that. Um so mine's fairly short. I'm only doing like a 30-page project, but I've really tried to delve in and like look at something incredibly specific. So I'm writing about detective fiction. And it's based off of a class that I took here, which was like a film and literature course based on detective fiction. So we spent a lot of time looking at like how it's progressed from like Greek tragedies, even like we did a really big span of time. So my project developed out of that class because I've always loved detective fiction. It's something that my grandmother loves and passed on to my mom, and they both passed it on to me. And so I was, listening to Nancy Drew audiobooks when I was like 7 years old, probably. Like I loved it. And then I always saw my mom reading detective fiction books. They were on her nightstand, and if I ever like woke up as a kid in the middle of the night and needed a drink, I'd like run downstairs and my mom's like watching David Suchet's Poirot. So like it's just something I was always around, but until this class I didn't realize like how much I really love it as a genre. So what this particular professor, who happens to also be my faculty advisor, my thesis chair, he always talks about how you can write more if you notice just like a really small detail, and then like open that up a little bit more. So that's what I've done with my thesis is I've taken the Sherlock Holmes story Silver Blaze, and there's a moment where, and this is kind of a spoiler alert-ish, sort of, he starts to figure out the mystery and to like solve what's going on because of a dish of curried mutton. And I thought that was really interesting, and kind of bringing in my experience with food and foodways and culture. I thought, oh, that's weird, that like this is the first thing that kind of set him off to figure out what happened, is a dish of curried mutton. And so then that's where my thesis started. Was I asked myself, well, how would Sherlock Holmes, who is, as many scholars have put, like the model of Victorian masculinity, how would he have known about curried mutton, and like its specific consistency to hide like powdered opium and like all these kinds of things. So that's where I started my research, was looking at, okay, how would Sherlock Holmes have known about curried mutton during Victorian times, and like does that complicate his masculinity? And spoiler on my thesis, it doesn't actually. It completely supports his model of masculinity within that world. And then I compare that to Miss Marple, who solves a mystery with her knowledge of like English trifles. And then I place Hercule Poirot kind of in the mix of this to look at, how does a detective's culinary knowledge specifically, for certain dishes, complicate gender roles within the genre. So that's very long-winded, but that's what I'm studying. That's what I'm looking at.
That's cool.
And it's a blast. And it's kind of funny because whenever I talk with other people in my cohort, I have friends who are writing about like Octavia Butler, and I have friends who are writing about like disabilities and rhetoric. And detective fiction is an incredibly like lighthearted subject to be studying, even as far as literature goes. And it doesn't feel as like important to study. There's not like a huge scholarly need for like more scholars in detective fiction. It's already a fairly small field. But it really boils down to, I wanted to pick a topic that I was okay spending a year and a half studying. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I'll go through and I'll write 20 pages and I'll revise and edit, and then I'll go home and still want to watch a Sherlock Holmes or a Miss Marple. And so that was a huge thing for me.
Well, I think that's actually really important to like not downplay that, because detective fiction is still a thriving part of our society. Like
It is.
I love Sherlock Holmes. I like, and I love the books. I love all the spin-offs, the show, like the BBC
Yes.
series.
Yeah.
Like I love Sherlock Holmes, and we see detective
Yeah.
fiction all over the place. Like I'm sure, I don't know, maybe I'm just gonna claim that like crime stuff that we have today probably spun off of
Oh,
similar style,
yeah.
shows where we love this interesting like crime thing, and figuring out how it happened and
Yeah.
who did it. Like I think they're all very kind of connected in that way, and it's a big part of our culture, honestly. So
Absolutely.
I would
Yeah.
never diminish it and say it's unimportant, because there's something about it that still intrigues people. So I think it's important. But I'm curious. So
Yeah.
to bind your thesis to your last response about empathy,
Hmm.
have you found in like, or in what ways have you found that you've become or increase your empathy from specifically from detective fiction?
That's a great question. I would actually say yes, I have. I focus a lot on golden age detective fiction, so I'm not looking at a whole lot of contemporary stuff.
Can you define
Um,
what the golden age
oh
is
yes,
for
so sorry.
plebeians like me?
No, absolutely. So the golden age pretty much, I mean, you could argue it kind of begins with Edgar Allan Poe. He has a detective, but truly it kind of begins with Sherlock Holmes. And so you get Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, you're getting Dorothy Sayers, you're getting Agatha Christie, you're getting G.K. Chesterton. So you have these really popular authors who were from like late Victorian to like post World War II is kind of what we're looking at there as far as golden age. So that's what I focus on. It's like the older whodunits, lots of the like manor house type of a thing where like you get everybody together in the room and you discover it, like the butler did it, that kind of a deal. But as far as empathy,
Clue.
yeah, right. Like that's kind of what we're thinking of when we think of golden age.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting time when you look at detective fiction, because even though it's like a very niche genre, authors are still trying to reflect their ideas and their feelings about what's happening to them in an incredibly fast-paced changing world, and they're writing about it in here. And it does take like an eye for somebody who like knows detective fiction a bit more to really unpack that. So within this time period, you're getting a lot of authors who are trying to decide like, how do you feel about law enforcement? Which
Well,
which you
that's relevant, isn't that?
right, yes, you see a really
Wow.
big shift in how law enforcement is portrayed.
Yeah.
I mean, a huge one during like World War I, post World War II, that period is, how do we feel about immigrants coming into our country? And I have a whole section on that because Poirot is a Belgian immigrant who, that was one of the largest groups that came into England during like World War II, or yeah, about World War II time. During that interwar period, there was a huge influx of Belgians, and you can see in these authors' writings like how they felt about certain groups and people coming in. And there are definitely parts that are outdated. Like I will always stand by that. Like, yes, there are some things in Agatha Christie or Dorothy Sayers, or even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle that are incredibly racist or xenophobic now. But I think you also see them kind of grappling with these ideas of, what does it mean to be loyal to one's nation, but also maybe show empathy towards immigrants coming in. What does that look like to have your hero, like the detective Poirot, be an immigrant working with largely upper middle class, classic English people. So I think that for me, I do see a lot of empathy there with the authors trying to figure out like this changing world. Where am I going to fit in? What am I thinking about? I don't know if most people would think about that as they're thinking about detective fiction. I mean, because you're looking at murders and some of them are pretty gruesome, and there's not a lot of empathy in that realm. But as far as the authors interacting with their own text, I think that there is quite a bit of empathy for life and the culture that's changing around them so rapidly.
That's cool because like we're always wrestling with some kind of issues and our
Oh yeah.
biases or whatever we write, whatever we do, it's gonna creep in. So
Yeah,
people are gonna analyze us today and be like, wow, they said that word,
it's
they
true.
thought this, they othered this group of people. Like whatever we do, like
Yeah.
we're the subject of future criticism no matter what. So that's a cool perspective. I hadn't thought about it that way. Um, what other lessons do you think are important to learn from like detective fiction that have helped enhance your life?
Oh man. That is a great question. I mean, I feel like this is a bit of a cliche, but when you study detective fiction so much, you naturally want to learn more about like detection and being able to like analyze things in life. But I think that there is some value in that. I mean, when you look at Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's work with Sherlock Holmes, the way that he sets up Holmes's ability to deduce makes it feel like you as a reader can also do that. And within the parameter of Holmes's world, like that's just impossible for you as a reader to really live up to that. Like there's no way that you're going to know, the dirt on someone's shoe is from this district in London. Like that's just not going to
Specific
happen.
smell of this
Yes.
cigarette was the, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that just does not happen.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of like paying attention so much to people and to the world around you that you're just trying to be more observant. And just trying to think about things maybe a little bit deeper. And so that's one thing. I mean, like I've always loved that about detective fiction, like trying to figure out like who done it before I get to the end. And there's lots of great things there as far as like keeping yourself active, like working with puzzles and mysteries and that type of a thing that I think are really beneficial. I think it teaches a lot of like critical thinking. So yeah, I'd say the critical thinking skills for sure. Observations.
That's cool. I like that. Yeah, it does. It's like it piques this curiosity of like how I don't know. I look at Sherlock Holmes personally, and I'm like, he is a superhero because he knows everything, and I feel like
Yes.
I can't know everything, but I always wanted to be, I don't know, super. And so
Yeah.
like I learned that knowledge was a way to make myself
Mm.
more than I was. It's cool. Yeah.
Actually, that's a really great point. I mean, because for Holmes in particular, in I believe it's Mungrave's I think it's Mungrave Rituals. He talks about when he first came to London, he studied like all these branches of science, right? So like he obviously felt it was important to learn all of these things. One thing I love about Miss Marple is she uses a lot of domestic knowledge to solve mysteries. So in that sense, I think it, no matter who you look at, we're valuing knowledge, rather we're valuing knowledge either from like a scientific and an academic standpoint or a domestic standpoint. So that's a really great observation that you had, as well as like there is value to knowledge and to learning things. And in these worlds it's to help you figure out who the murderer is. And that doesn't happen with us so much, but there is, as you said, like there's a great inherent value in just like learning things.
Yeah, that's cool to also like separate the kinds of knowledge out. Domestic knowledge. That's like something that maybe in common society today people shy away from because it's been almost forced upon,
Yeah.
let's say like women. And
Yeah.
but look at the value that there is there. Like that's interesting that we can always bring that back and say, okay, let's hold our horses before we go too far to one side. Like,
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I have more questions. So
Brilliant.
this is actually really fascinating to hear you talk about. I love this. Um, so in learning, like I've learned a little bit from classes, or it might have been like even at church, someone was telling me about what the typical hero's journey is. Because
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I honestly, I probably should have looked it up before this, but didn't. And I don't know how to detail that journey perfectly, but it goes something like they're in this situation and they like face a challenge that requires them to essentially fall or go through this journey through a wilderness kind of thing, and they have to
Mm-hmm.
go through these struggles and trials to either gain skills or knowledge or whatever to build
Yeah.
themselves up to a point to defeat the evils that they're facing and end up in this happier spot than they began in. I don't know if that's even, I'm sure I'm skipping a lot of important
No,
parts.
I think you're right on. Yeah, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. It's yeah, you're I mean, you see it in like Harry Potter, Hunger Games, Lord of the Rings. Absolutely, this mundane has to go on this journey and leave things behind and face adversity. Yeah, no, you're spot on there. Yeah.
Okay, I'm actually doing this like based on scripture knowledge. So like because the Bible and Book of Mormon, they're riddled with heroes' journeys. It's actually really validating because sometimes when I go through a tough time, I'm like, this is my journey part, and
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
just I will get there. It will be okay. Anyway, that all being said, is there a separate journey for detectives? Is there a detective's journey? Because or is it the same kind of hero's journey? Because I don't know if it's the same or yeah. How does that look?
When you asked me this question prior, and I'm so glad you did, so I could think about it a little
Uh
bit.
huh.
I had never thought about that before, and so it was fun to look at like the novels I'm studying and say, okay, like what is the journey that's kind of going on here? Um, so as far as like golden age, so the things I'm looking at, there is not necessarily, I mean, you could probably argue that there is a bit of a journey. So typically like the detective is confronted with a mystery. Somebody usually is hiring him. And I say him because with golden age, typically the professional detectives are male, so they're being hired. Then you have like amateur sleuths like Miss Marple, and they just happen to run into all of these murders somehow in their little villages. So usually like a murder happens typically. And I'll get into that in a second. So typically it's a murder. They go through and then they identify different suspects. And I don't want to like break the magic, but there is a lot of formula to like figuring out mysteries. And so typically you're going to run into the actual murderer somewhere like first 2/3 of the book. So you're introduced to all these suspects. Typically there's going to be a red herring thrown in there, so that can either be like it's very clear somebody did it when they actually didn't, or maybe like there's a clue that you think's important but it's actually not. And you as a reader are like kind of trying to go along with it. The detective's always like 1 or 2 steps ahead of you though. So then you get to the end, and as far as golden age goes, there's usually a really nice little wrap up where everybody meets in the sitting room and he goes through and he talks about how like, you know, why or why not this person did it, and the last person talked about is the actual murderer. And I always just love that like everybody sits through this, like the murderer doesn't even try to run, like they just accept it, and they like there's so many little things like that I just find hilarious. You know, and then we figure it out. And a huge theme in detective fiction for that era is, and then the world is set right. So that's kind of like we return back to a normacy, where this evil, this has been rooted out and dealt with in a just way. So there's lots of themes of like justice and like normality going on there. A lot of this structure was set up by a man named Ronald Knox. So during this golden age time, he was actually an author as well, and dabbled in detective fiction, but he created this club, which is hilarious. And so it was like this exclusive club for detective fiction authors. And you had to be sworn in. And the rumor is when they were sworn in, they would like put their hand on a human skull and like all this stuff. It was incredibly dramatic.
That's
And I love
perfect.
I know, right? I
Yeah.
love to think it's all true. But as part of this club and these like, I mean, basically they've like reinvented the joke, like they really kicked it off. They had to follow these 10 rules, or like the 10 commandments is what he called them. So I won't read through like the whole list, but the idea is the criminal must be someone mentioned in the early part of the story, but must not be anybody's thoughts who the reader has been allowed to follow. All supernatural or preternatural agencies are ruled out as a matter of course. I love this one. They're so specific. Not more than one secret room or passage is allowable. So you get these like 10 commandments that these authors basically said, yes, okay, I'll do that.
I know that like things like have broken those rules
Oh yeah,
since, all right, like
absolutely.
yeah, but I mean we're great at breaking rules here, but that's
Yes.
cool. That's cool. There's a
Isn't that
formula that
great?
they abode by.
And I love that like you even see that especially, I mean, again, I study Agatha Christie, but especially with her, you see these detectives going through and slowly like breaking each rule with different novels. And it's so fun to see that. And like, yeah, if you follow these rules, like it's great and it can still be a fun story, but it's really fantastic when you take this model and break it. And I think the most recent popular breakage of these rules is Rian Johnson's The Knives Out film, Glass Onion. And he has a TV show, Poker Face, that really play with these rules. And that's what I love about this contemporary detective fiction is we're all about breaking these rules and messing with them to make it more exciting and to really throw off the reader, which is so fun, right? So to go back, as far as the hero's journey, you see a pattern with Golden Age detective fiction that's fairly structured. You see it kind of reinvented again with like the 50s and 60s, the hard-boiled or the film noir detectives, and they're really quite anti-hero, so it's like an anti-hero's journey per se. And now I feel like as far as contemporary authors go, we're just like all over the place, and as far as like breaking this structure, so it's not so much of a journey. Well, I'm sure there is a journey structure to it, but yeah, it's quite broken at this point.
Do you, because you like know that structure, has it in any way ruined some of the things that you read because you're like, oh, I know exactly who it is because I can't read their thoughts, or like
Yeah.
I know exactly, like have you been able to figure it out and been like, I don't know the point of going through the rest of this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll still read it even if I know
Uh-huh.
who it is because like I enjoy going back and reading and finding other things. But yeah, absolutely. There's at this point I'll, go and read a Christie novel that I haven't read, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's this person based off of these things, right? Which isn't very fun if you're watching or reading something with somebody else because you can figure it out structurally kind of what's um I was
Wow.
I was even invited to a murder mystery party, like my
Yeah.
graduate student friends. Yeah, we had a murder mystery party during Christmas time, and everybody was expecting me to figure it out because this is what I study,
Mhm.
which is hilarious because I felt like Benoit Blanc in Glass Onion, where he's like, "No, I'm so bad at stupid things," and not that it's stupid, but like it's not structured like a
Uh,
novel. And so I was trying to figure it out like in a literary way where it's like, okay, based off of this person and this clue. And that's just simply not how the game was laid out. So I was not very good. I'm not very good at those. I get quite
yeah.
frustrated actually.
And you're also playing a character, right? So you have to like
Yes.
somehow stay in character while you're
Yeah.
sleuthing.
It was
Uh,
very fun though.
I remember I wasn't very good at the first one that I did, and like I didn't understand how to like read through the scenarios the right way, and like
Yeah.
I started drawing connections and like making assumptions that I would like say that I wasn't supposed to say apparently, but it's like, oh, I didn't even, I don't know. It was just,
Yeah.
but they're fun. They're fun experiences, but
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you can figure that stuff out. That's maybe we'll be able to figure it out too, since you've told us some of the secrets. Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't spoil it for you.
Probably not. That's cool though that you can do that. It's like another superpower. Um,
Hmm.
I was just thinking also like, so I think my first introduction to, well, let's say detective, I wouldn't even call it literature, but detective stuff was Scooby-Doo,
Oh my goodness.
which is
Yes.
like such a prominent part of like childhood network
Yes.
television, right? And so
Absolutely.
I wonder how much that influenced. I'm just throwing it out there. Like I wonder how much that influenced my enjoyment of detective kind of stuff and mysteries. And because is it, how would you say, maybe this is just me like not knowing things, detective fiction, mysteries, is that the same kind of stuff, or is there a difference between
So
how we view that?
there can be a slight difference. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention with the Ten Commandments, in particular with the Golden Age, is there has to be a murder. So detective fiction typically is dealing with a murder, although there are some stories where somebody's kidnapped, say, or there's like a ransom for something, right?
Okay.
So detective fiction very much deals with that realm. Mystery can be kind of like in my mind, this is Emily. This is not like
Which
academic
is
stuff.
pretty official, but we'll not hold you to it. How about
Thanks. I
that?
feel like mystery can be kind of like an umbrella term. So you can
Okay.
have like a mystery, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a murder. I think of like Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, Scooby Doo being more like mystery
Okay.
television. Um, and which is different than police and crime fiction,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So a lot of contemporary kind of detective TV shows are going to be more crime fiction type of shows,
Okay.
where you're dealing with like official police, like detective chief inspectors. It's more like a forensic kind of a view, and that may or may not deal with murder. That can be like a variety of things. So you have like detective fiction, you've got crime fiction, and then within detective fiction, you do have like the subgenre of hard-boiled detectives. So that's like your classic 1950s like anti-hero kind of a guy, private eyes usually. And then you also have the subgenre of cozy or like soft-boiled detectives, with like culinary mysteries as well. And so those can be
I don't know if I know anything about this. This is
I
all
know
new to me.
it's such random knowledge that like when am I ever gonna pull this out? Like I'm standing
Like,
in line like waiting to get like a drink or something and I
is that a
whip it out.
profession? Can someone go into culinary detectivism? Like,
I mean that would be my dream job,
yeah.
is to just study that. um it's so fun. And
Huh.
and even within that you'll have like more hard-boiled detectives where they're focused on like professional kitchens and restaurants, right? But then you have a lot of these like cozy mysteries that deal with, typically it's a female protagonist who is an amateur sleuth who is connected with food in a large way, and that can be cooking or baking at home in a domestic capacity, or they own a catering business, they own like a bakery or something like that. Like Joanne Fluke is a really, or Flunk, I think I said that right. I have not read a lot of her stuff, but she's really large within that. Um, there's always like a big old section in like Barnes and Noble or like most bookstores you go to where it's like culinary detective fiction,
Wow.
and it's usually like these like food puns. It's like death by chocolate, and just stuff like that. So it's really
Yeah,
cute. So yeah, you have all
yeah.
these different like genres and subgenres within it.
Oh,
So
that's
but as far as like
fascinating.
mystery go, I feel like that is a good all-encompassing term for talking about like all of that.
I had no idea.
Right.
This is so cool to learn about. Um, Awesome. I think I have asked almost all the questions I want to. Last one that I want to see. I'm gonna
Yes,
actually look through because you wrote down some recommendations,
I did.
and I'm gonna let you see before we like read the recommendations. Are there any that have like come to your mind that you're like, I think people should read this, and it's okay if it's on the list that you already gave me?
Oh my goodness. I was gonna say most of them are probably on the list. So again, to preface, I study a lot of Golden Age, so I do not know a lot of great contemporary detective fiction or crime fiction to go to. But as far as like the beginnings of this genre, if you want to start at kind of like the beginning, because you could argue that the genre started before this. Edgar Allan Poe's he has this couple of mysteries and murders and such that focused around a detective named Dupin. And so I believe he's French. And that's a really great place to kind of start. And if you've read Holmes, or if you know kind of that model, if you go back and look at it, you'll be like, oh my goodness, yes, I see where Doyle got all of this stuff for Holmes. It's very much setting up this armchair detective who's like brilliant. Okay. So that's a great place to start if you want to go to like the beginning of the genre. Um, as far as Agatha Christie is always a fantastic place to start. Um, she has an incredible amount of novels. So they do technically have an order, but you can pick them up and read them in whatever order you want. They don't necessarily have like an arc to them. Um, as far as her like most popular ones, which are arguably like some of her best, Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile are fantastic. They've been turned into films multiple times, but like going back and reading the text, they are different. I also think Murder of Roger Ackroyd is a really fantastic one. All three of those are playing and breaking those 10 commandment rules that we talked about before, and they're just
Yeah.
really quite fun.
Is
um
she right? And then there
oh
were
yeah,
none.
go for
Is
it.
that Christy?
Which one?
And then there were none.
Yes,
All
yeah,
right.
that's
Okay.
another
Mm,
really awesome
yeah.
one. I love that. That's probably my favorite Agatha Christie's,
Yeah.
and then there were none. I
I
love
love
that
that one.
one.
But I haven't read the others, so I should probably read the others because
Yeah,
that's the only one of hers that I've read, and
it's
I
good.
loved it. Yep.
The most contemporary one that's still like fairly cozy, I would say, that I love is the Thursday Murder Club series by Richard Osman. And I have all three right above my head. They're like right there. They're so good. And what I like about those is I feel like they pay homage to this golden age while still being modern and up to date. They're set in Britain. So it's a very British series. And all of the murders and mysteries take place in this retirement home, basically. And so you have all of these retirees running around like in their 70s solving these murders. And I fell in love with the characters and like seeing their friendship and relationship. And the mysteries are quite complex too. They're quite fun. So that's probably like my most recent favorite series that I love, the Thursday Murder Club. So
So cool. Awesome. I would add to your list for children at least, Encyclopedia Brown.
oh my goodness, yes.
That counts as detective, even though it's not murders,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
All right. Those were also those followed my Scooby-Doo days, I think.
Those are really great ones. I do love Encyclopedia Brown.
Those were so fun. Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you so much, Emily, for like talking about all this. I can see the sun has like changed and probably is blinding you at this point.
No, it's okay.
You took all the time to meet, but thank you for talking about this. I think people will learn a lot from what you have to say, and I'm just so glad that you came to join, and I think the world of you. So thank you for sharing all of this.
Thanks. I mean, thank you, especially, going full circle. People who love and study literature don't often get to talk about it. It's not really something we get to delve into a whole ton. So thank you for showing interest in an incredibly niche thing that I love and study. So I really appreciate it, Gregory. Thank you.
Absolutely.